Hey, y'all, we wanted to invite you to partner with us in this ministry. Preachers Hour needs your support.
In order to make more and better content, we need you, yes, you listening to this right now, to become a patron.
Choose the tier that best fits your preferences and help us make theology for our context.
Thanks and enjoy this episode.
What up, guys? Welcome back to Preachers Hour. This is part 2, talking about missions. I thought part 1 was powerful. If you didn't enjoy John's story, you can always fast forward, but I think you missed a lot. It was great. And I think it really set up what we're going to talk about in this part, which is, first question here, why are overseas missions important? So John had said something towards the end that really stuck out to me, is this idea that the American church has an influence on the global church. And I never thought about that. I think, like I said off camera, like I don't know if I wanted to believe that, because I'm like, we spend so much time being critical of the American church that it's hard for me to imagine people taking us seriously and like listening to us and trying to copy us, because we're so jacked up. There's a reason why by 2030, 70% of the world's Christians will be from the global south, will not be from Western countries. Yeah. Right. So the church, this is what I always tell people, and I understand the concern. I mean, almost every podcast, every video, the church in America is in trouble. And they'll equate it to the church is in trouble. The church is fine.
It's growing.
The church is doing great. The Big C church. So I'm always like, I'm not going to jump on the alarm. Obviously, I live in America. My kids live in America. I would like them to be Christian. Yeah. So a healthy American church would be ideal. That would be great. We need to work towards that. But I'm not concerned about the church. It's doing great. And it's always going to be doing great because it's growing in South America and Africa and Asia. It's doing fine.
Yeah. So let's do this. How about I start off with, it comes to my mind because I think automatically most people have some, whether you're religious or not, Christian or not, a lot of critiques maybe of what short-term mission. Now let's define what mission is. Mission is basically anything you kind of work like we talked about.
Let's define the term. We actually didn't do that at
mission.
all.
Man, I don't have. I mean, you could Google it if you want, but I don't. Not going to do that right now. But I think mission work simply would be a group of people or even individual technically going somewhere and participating in what God is designed to do. And it could come through things as literally like evangelism. I'm going to preach and teach and tell people about Jesus. It could also come through, which a lot of missionaries also, through like social change, such as like I'm going to help meeting physical needs. So if I'm a doctor, I'm going to go offer my services in this country that doesn't have access to certain kind of health care. Nice. Or it could be, I'm going to teach people different languages. I mean, it could be a vast different things. And you kind of break that up even into short-term missions and long-term missions. There is no like agreed upon what is a short-term. Yeah. I think a short-term in my mind would be
under a year.
I think some people would even kind of push back with that even as well. Shorter. Again, you could see how there's a
right, because you guys did 3 weeks essentially.
Right.
So,
yeah. And that definitely you could categorize that as short-term missions, right? I think long-term, I think the difference would be you're going to like the intentionality of like if long-term missions, you're going to go choose to live there and your life is now going to be for whether a period of time or for the foreseeable future in that place. Where short-term missions, it could be like I'm going for the summer for this place to serve. I'm going for a couple of weeks. Okay. Correct. Yeah. Now, where do we get this idea from? In the Bible, we see missionaries actually doing this within the early church. Paul himself, technically, as he went out and spread the good news about
multiple missionary
Jesus,
journeys.
I think traditionally they go about 3 is what he took, but I think obviously there's flux 4, to say that there's more than that even as well. And what we see is he went out, he was establishing churches, he was establishing people who were native to that land to build up churches for that area to be able to continue on the message of Jesus Christ. And we continue to see that even throughout, not just with Paul's life, but many other people. And especially as you take a look at church history, as Christianity began to spread, you see actual missionaries going either for a time period and building up natives, or them themselves now relocating to certain areas to be able to establish churches, to preach the good news, to help service the community, all those kind of different things. And that's what the church traditionally has done throughout the years. Yeah. Now let's address the negative.
Talk about,
help me out with you're the history guy.
So there's a history with colonialism.
Yes.
and that being equated with mission work, right? So, yes, let's get that out of the way. The Catholic Church, not to throw you guys under the bus, but it was y'all. The Catholic, back when everybody was Catholic, before 1500, the Catholic Church went with explorers and colonizers to other parts of the world, South America, Central America, Africa, not Asia, but yeah, just those parts of the world. And along with taking over those places and making them into colonies of these European nations, the church came and brought missionaries to also convert those people into Catholics. Correct. Right? Now, some of them genuinely cared for the people they were going to try to help them become followers of Jesus. Others, the church saw an opportunity to have power, have influence, get money, get resources. So there is a mix. Obviously, the overall effect, you could probably say, was mostly negative. I mean,
sure, we can be honest.
The effects of indigenous people and different indigenous populations, Native Americans, people in Central South America, and to this day, especially in Central and South America, they are wrestling with trying to, how do we follow Jesus, but our way, and not the Spanish or Brazilian way, Portuguese way of, how do we separate that European culture from Christianity? Correct. And some people would say that they can't. Other people, they're wrestling through it. So, so when we're talking about missions today, as Protestants, we are very quick to we are not trying to do that. We're not trying to. Now, people do it. Correct. But we're not intentionally trying to bring our culture and turn people into our culture.
American Christians.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, there is a history of that unintentionally with Protestants even, who go and they think there's only one way to be Christian, is to look like a Westerner, versus you can be African and follow Jesus, you can be Asian and follow Jesus, and vice versa. So
yeah, and so that's even our tagline, doing of Preacher's Hour, doing theology for our context, because each context is going to require a different approach when it comes to the gospel. But that doesn't mean that the foundation,
the gospel is not changing.
Correct.
But we have to
the approach
make the gospel palatable. Yeah. Right. I said this in my sermon last week, and we learned this from Mark Baker, who we had on the podcast, friend of the podcast, that the gospel is supposed to both connect to and confront every culture, every human culture. So there are good things in human cultures that the gospel wants to connect and say, hey, you guys got these things right. This is actually beautiful. There are also, because of sin, every single culture has something wrong with it that the gospel needs to confront and change and transform and get rid of. So now what I just said has not always been believed by Christians.
And still is.
It's actually a relatively new idea that we learned in Mark's class when it comes to the interactional model of doing contextual theology. We had a whole episode on contextual theology.
Go back and take a look at that. So I think the question a lot of people think, and they make the assumption when they hear missions, they automatically, for rightful reasons, because of colonization, anything else, they would say, oh, missions is inherently bad. It can't be done good. But that's just not true and not correct. There is a healthy, good way in which missions is done. We've just seen a lot of negative examples of it. And the reality is, too, there is lots of history, specifically even within the 20th century, as dark as it was in America, and a lot of segregation, a lot of injustices, I agree. But as missionaries were being sent from the States to other places in the world, there is a lot of healthy examples of how, yes, they brought the message of Jesus Christ, but there's also a holistic aspect of it, where they were really actually developing communities that probably wouldn't have been developed
bringing
as they
clean water and helping them with medical stuff and farming practices, and just having a physical impact on the places and made them better for that.
Correct. Yeah. And so we recognize the word missions can come off for many people as something that is negative. Now, so again, we see it in the scriptures. We've seen it throughout history. We've seen it now even today, and as I got the opportunity to participate in it. And now the reality is like we talked about last time. I think a good mission mission, let's just use that, or missionary work is one where it is there's an exchange, an actual like exchange
interaction,
both individuals, like Jeff was talking about, where I come not simply just to give you something, Jeff, you're not just simply giving me something, but we both have something to offer with one another.
Right.
And now, so the beautiful thing about this most recent mission trip that got the opportunity to go on is that I felt like that really actually did happen. Whereas we were sitting there, especially there's a local church, Love Church, shout out to you. Hopefully some of you guys will actually listen to this as well, to my Cape Town family. We got the opportunity to sit down, have conversations, go do things with one another, spend time with one another, joke, laugh, have conversations, some really serious things. And we got the opportunity to be like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Like, let me hear more. And they also do the same thing. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Let me hear more. Or that doesn't really make sense. And then also they'll say us, that doesn't really make sense either as well. And so we're exchanging these ideas with one another. However, at the same time, we are interconnected because of our relationship first with God through Jesus Christ. Amen. And so there's this beautiful thing that's happening through this exchange where we also recognize that the work of God is bigger than just our own context. And so that's why I think one of the first things we have to identify is what's important about missions is it helps us give us a global perspective of what is really going on in the world and the work of God throughout the world even as well.
Yeah, I was literally going to ask you, and you just answered it. So it's like it helps us get out of our own kind of bubble,
correct,
and like lift our heads up and realize, oh, God is moving everywhere, which I think is an encouragement to like both sides.
It is.
It's like, oh wow, God's doing stuff in America. Oh wow, God's doing stuff in Cape Town. Like, man, I keep coming back to like even in my own life, I love God. I'm a follower of God. I'm a follower of Jesus. But I still, even myself, I need reminders throughout life that God is real.
No, for real.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, dang, like you really are doing, like you had that experience you had in the prison. It's like, okay, Spirit, you're really doing stuff. Like you are real. Like this thing that we are doing, like this, it's not in vain. Like we are really actually joining you, God, in your work in the world to renew the world. Like this is not just a waste of time.
Yep.
And we can get so locked into our little like ministry, you know, on Ashland and Cedar.
Yep.
And just think this is all there is.
Yep.
And it's like, no, man, like God wants to remind us at times, hey, look over here. Look over here. Look, be encouraged.
Yep.
I think that's...
And that the work of God is happening. And so, yeah, that's that thought alone I could sit here all day on and go back and forth on. I think if you're religious or not, Christian or not, again,
right,
having a global understanding of how the world works, like that's a virtue.
Yeah, I think that's universally that is an important
thing.
Like
that's something if, like to be support people who are individual, like who are globally minded and not just bound to their own context. We can actually see within them the way their worldview works, the empathy, all kind of stuff. Like you are better for it, and I think we see that through missions is one of the things. Now think about this as well. And I was sitting on this. Someone preached on this passage recently on Daniel chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, which is their slave name, by the way.
Azariah, and Mishael.
There you go. And now I never caught this in the stories that Nebuchadnezzar, he was telling everything and built these statues and everything, and he's like, bow down to me, right? And it says that, literally says, and he was forcing all the nations in every language to bow down to him. And I'm just thinking about also now the book of Revelation, where it says at the end of time, every knee shall confess and every knee shall confess. How did knees confess? Every tongue shall confess and knee shall bow that Jesus is Lord. And thinking about like there's these two sort of parallels in contrast and almost in tension with one another, where there is things of this world that want to try by our unity, but they want to take from us, and they don't actually have anything positive for us. They require something of us that hurts us, harms us, and destroys our communities, and we can make the excuse, oh, this binds us all of us people and language together. Or there is the living God who has given us all, who ultimately wants to connect all people groups together and actually create healthy and whole communities. And I think part of what Global Missions does is partakes in saying, I'm refusing to bow down to the gods of this world that want to destroy our communities, that want to hurt us, that give us the impression that we're all interconnected and give us unity, when in reality it's around an unhealthy thing.
That's right.
And we say, no, our allegiance is to King Jesus, who comes to give to us. and ultimately give us a healthy, thriving life in communities that we're all actually desiring.
Yeah, it's like and I keep, this thing comes up to my life, that we're practicing the kingdom of God. So we're like, we're living as though it's already come. We're getting ready to live like that. So I think when you see Revelation 7, like every tribe, every nation, every tongue, no one could count this number of people from everywhere worshiping God. I think when we go on a global mission, or we interact with people from other places and are on our commonality with Jesus, that is like a foretaste of what's coming.
Yes.
And it's like it just makes us a little bit more like, oh yeah, man, this feels great. This is a taste of the kingdom that's going to be coming.
Amen. And I think there's one place that we went to, I forgot what church it exactly was, but I think actually, no, it was a colored church. I think it was in Nova Park. And we were singing a song, and we sung it both in Afrikaans and English. And I was thinking, this is what is to come.
Yeah, man.
Like every nation, every tongue, every language, dialect, nationality, ethnic group, culture represented before the King, unified under the banner of Jesus, coming to worship him. And like you said, Jeff, we get a picture of this. Now let me give another critique.
Yeah.
A lot of people will say this, well, there's all these issues in your own hometown, your own neighborhood.
So my next question, what about domestic stuff?
Look at that. I'm already I didn't even look at the questions.
Yeah,
there you go.
Here, bro.
And like, why? Like, it seems like you're going to spend all this money to go overseas and then just leave when you're not addressing the actual physical needs. And I think that's a valid critique.
That's a great question.
Because there has been moments and times, and still is today, where churches and organizations spend thousands, if not millions of dollars overseas and just let like their own neighborhoods and communities be neglected. And it's unfortunate, and it is not just, and I don't think it is the will of God in a lot of ways. But I think, though, we also have to realize God, like, there's this tension we need to hold. God does call us absolutely to care and love for our neighbors around us. That is our priority. But he also calls us, again, like we just talked about, to have a care and a love for the church of the world, for the global connectedness of what's happening even outside of our context. So we have to find a way to marry these two actually together, and I think that's the whole point. So again, one of the ways in which we do that is, yes, we send missionaries, or we try to raise support, and we send ourselves, so to say. But we also have to realize that as Christians, we are more than people who are spectators or observers of Christianities, but we need to look at ourselves as people who are currently on mission in our given context today. And that's where it has to start off with. And I think, unfortunately, many of us have a very difficult time of seeing ourselves on mission in our own communities, in our own workplaces, in our own families even as well.
Yeah, I think talking about like why missions are important, and getting back to the idea that it helps both sides, right? And again, we have an influence on them. I think the people that went on this trip, they experienced God and what he's doing through different people there. Now they're able to come back to the United States, to our context, and they should be more equipped to do domestic mission.
Correct.
And so, and again, like you said, like how we have an influence. So I'm thinking like we need to realize that we have an influence. So part of going over there, and again, you guys just coming back and talking to us who didn't go, right? I have been enriched because I'm like, okay, so rather than, well, let me not say that. I think it's healthy to critique what's happening in America. Like we do need to be trying actively to help the American church be more healthy. I think that's just fair. I mean, we got to be careful how we critique, but I think it's important to try to make things better, right? But understanding that, number one, our brothers and sisters overseas are looking at us and looking to us. And it's like, okay, like how are we representing God, not only for like non-believers, but for like our fellow believers, right? And then how are we like helping them, giving them resources to help them do the work of the kingdom where they are. And then this is another thing that we don't talk about enough. I think it's becoming more of a popular idea. Because we are becoming more secular and Christianity is dying quote unquote. There's been this like half joke, but like truth that like we need to get missionaries from there to come here. Right. that's kind of what happened. Because you guys went over there and were influenced by them, now you can come back and say, hey, this is where we're off.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, there is actual studies and actually proof that there is actual different people from different continents actually sending missionaries to America.
We need it.
Not jokingly.
Yeah. It's so clear that we are in need of a revival, of a move of God to like help us realize, hey, you guys are off here. You need the gospel. You need like a fresh retelling of the gospel. From someone who's outside your context. And so I think again, if you have all the critiques about, missions, that alone to me is a good enough valid reason why it's important to send people to other places, not to give them the gospel, like you said, but to help clear up our view of the gospel, our view of God, and bring that back here and even bring them here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we as the church, as the Big C church, we are all on the same mission together, right? To help spread God's presence and renewal to the world. And so if we can be more united and be in better relationship, I think it's going to help all of us do the purpose of God better. Right? So, I'm encouraged by what you guys are able to do, and I would love if we could, not only that do we have a 5-year commitment to go there.
Yes, and so it's kind of even like share for the sake. So part of the 5-year commitment that we have going forward is continue on with the work with the organizations and churches that we're currently working with, and we did work this past time. One of the ways is to continue to support certain ministries actually we want to further, send funds and money over there to certain organizations so they continue to grow and expand and to serve people, like literally physically meet actual people's needs, keep kids out of gangsterism and actually being able to go to school, give them other opportunities. But we also, one of our first things we're really pushing hard for is to be able to basically start these houses. So while we're inspired by these houses, there's this place called the House of Miracles outside Cape Town, or not actually in Cape Town, sorry. And basically there's this woman, because of the Holy Spirit and the love of God and the love for her neighborhood and these kids, she's literally just opened up her house, and it's nothing special. There's not a state-of-the-art facility. It is probably, for some of you have more critiques than positive things to say. And there's about 40 kids or plus come to her home, and it's just a safe place in the middle of gang infestation, places where there is unfortunately kids getting raped, and there's lots of drugs and violence and all that sort of stuff, for them to come simply play and be kids, and it's a safe place for them. And again, she's not doing this because she gets paid or because it's beneficial for them. Sometimes she even uses her own finances and money to feed these kids, and it's because of that own generosity and the love that God has given her, she's trying to extend to other people. And so I honor some of my heart, along with supporting her and what she's actually doing, to be able to start some of these also in some other more difficult neighborhoods throughout the Cape Town, or the Western Cape, throughout the Providence, let's use that language. And in that we're trying to establish these in some of the roughest places, to be able to not simply send us over there and do it, or not just to simply just throw money at them, but to be able to help actually now raise up natives from that area who are leaders, who actually now for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years be able to make a generational impact in those communities and actually those areas. And honestly, a lot of people are like, well, where's the complex strategies and all that stuff? We have the complex strategy and all that sort of stuff, but we have to realize how even just simple as like a safe place can be for so many people. And that's one of the things that we're trying. We've made a commitment for the next 5 years in this plan that we have to be able to establish, raise funds for, and to be able to launch more initiatives that we have going on.
I mean, something I'm thinking about is like also bringing people from there here.
We're trying. It's just the U.S. dollar is not in our favor. So if you guys don't know much about how currency kind of works, so they don't have a dollar. They don't use the dollar system. They have the rand. And for general, it always is fluctuating. It's basically $1 US, 18 of theirs. Damn. And so that's why it's a little bit easier to send a group of our size.
Because the money goes farther there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's why that's even more the importance of the investment we can make there from the U.S. church is actually our dollar will go farther, and it can impact even more people even as well. I think about this in the Bible when Paul was going, a lot of people kind of read over this, but he was taking up an offering or collection for the poor church in Jerusalem who was going through something. And there was a lot of people, he says, even out of their own poverty, they decided to give for the sake of others so that they could have. And I think, yes, there is a lot of valid critiques. There is, especially we live in California, where housing crisis is definitely a big thing. Homelessness, you don't need to be blind to see that. Drug, like all this sort of stuff. Like me and other people, like I'm aware of it very much so. And we have issues, and we have real poverty, and we have real things that we can't mitigate or we shouldn't undermine, right? But I think even call out of our own poverty, we had to realize that we could actually make a difference in other people's lives in the world, including our own streets here in Fresno, but also including globally even as well. And again, all of these things that we've talked about at missions, you can hold in tension, yes, all the negative things throughout history that we can point to and identify. But at the same time, as we really break down what the heart of this is, you have to realize there is a significance both for short-term and long-term missions, and for also local missions and global missions even as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, the stuff that you described in the first part about what you saw, like the word that kept coming up to my mind was like dehumanized. And it's like the effects of ultimately sin manifested in the form of poverty and drugs and violence and gang stuff like that. Like it makes people live as less than God created them to be. Yeah. And we can see that here in, like you said, even in America and just in our state alone. You know, I went to San Francisco 2 years ago now, and walked through the Tenderloin and just, it's like these are people, but they're not living like people. They're living like something subhuman. And it's like what, and you can get into, this is the same problem in any country, especially in South Africa, but it's like you can get into like the problems are so complex that there's no easy solution. So it's like, it's almost like, what's the point? Because it's okay, you fed people for a day, but then what? Like you're not solving the problem. And I don't know if we can as the church, but we can do something. We can alleviate even a little bit. We can just let people know that God sees them and that he wants to help them, and like he's with them. He's present with them, even through us being the quote unquote, this cliche hands and feet. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
So I think this, because it can be like you said, identified, you can get overwhelmed. You can feel like, I don't know where to start, all kind of things. But I think here's some helpful kind of first steps in that, right? Recognize that first, before anything else, you are called to be a local missionary to your own community, your own neighborhood, right? And I think that is a great, perfect starting place where even if you never have the ability to be able to travel overseas, or maybe you're not necessarily have a necessarily pressing desire within you to travel overseas, because I don't think it needs to be for everyone. Right. You can begin somewhere in identifying what are some of the needs that I see within my own town, my own city. Because the thing is this, and we're going to be completely honest, and I have no way to sugarcoat it. Being a Christian requires action. Yeah. 1,000%. It's not something that can just simply be accomplished being passive. I don't think those two words necessarily can go together, Christian and passivity. I just don't think they're connected in any way. So I think we have to recognize that part of being a Christian, living our faith out, as James would say, is almost like a quote, a million different verses would say. We need to recognize that we need to be people who actually genuinely take care of the quote-unquote orphans and widows and marginalized and foreigners among us, which simply, in a very simple sense, and we exegete it for you real quick, basically just the vulnerable in our community. And to be honest, like yesterday I was literally driving through Southeast Fresno, and there was a little corner near Tulare Street. I'm not going to tell you the stretch exactly where, but I was like, dude, I promise you, it's hot right now, so it's also like people are wearing less clothes, but some people that I saw who were homeless, it literally was like, did I just get transported to another country real quick? Like it almost felt like, what is going on here? So we obviously have issues and problems and things that we need to address here at home. But the thing is, we can't simply just think the government is going to solve it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to be complete. I mean, there is solutions which we can which we can lobby.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the right word. We can advocate for, and we can vote, and we can put certain people in power in the sense of like councilmen and councilwomen,
local
and
politics.
Mayors and local politics. Absolutely do that. Actually, I'm in a district, which I'm not going to say on here, that I really do care. I literally read, you can ask my wife, I went through a 130-page document about my I almost said freaking neighbor. I guess I said now freaking neighborhood. About all the different things and where the plan is for the next years and so forth. And I think this is important for us to know what's going on.
Yeah.
But also we can start somewhere with something very small and recognize there is a lot of nonprofits, organizations, churches in this area that generally are trying to make an impact. And you can even start with just saying, hey, I want to invest $10 into a local organization, Fresno Rescue Mission, Poverilla House, YFC, Youth for Christ, all these kind of different things that I can continue to name off. And also recognizing that you also can like be more than just a money giver, even as well in that too. I get it. We have different responsibilities, different requirements, more flexibility in our schedules, all those kind of different things. But there is definitely someone and something like you can have an impact in that can go even beyond just simply giving money to something even as well. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be formal or super structured. It can simply just be like, I'm going to be intentional about when I go to work today, I'm going to ask the person, like, how are you actually doing? And through that, making myself available for conversation. Hey, instead of and I actually took this from another local pastor here. And I was like, man, I love that. It might have been let me shout the person out, like Joe White, I think it might have been, or Joseph White, he's gone by now. And I think he even said, like, instead of us looking at like homeless individuals or unhoused individuals as like a burden or a problem, we should actually look at it as an opportunity to like see someone and love them and care for them. And that requires shifting a heart posture. And that's not easy, be honest with you, because the reality is our natural reactions and our fleshly reactions to be kind of disturbed and like distraught by seeing someone in a situation because they're being dehumanized is because it wasn't God's will or perfect plan from the very beginning.
It's supposed to make us uncomfortable.
Correct. And so, though, how we respond to it shouldn't necessarily be let's run away from it and close our eyes or hide behind gated neighborhoods. It's okay if you live in a gated neighborhood, by the way. But my point is to be able to say, how can we actually take simple little steps that ultimately add up to bigger sort of impact and solutions for what we see around us.
And I mean, just to like sum up everything. So I think one of the positives of doing overseas mission is that most of the time our resources can go farther there, right? On top of that, with domestic issues, we actually do have a semi-working government that I think, honestly, as you were talking,
can be grateful for, as much as you have a lot of
be grateful
things to
for,
say,
and also as you're talking, I'm like, yo, like, I don't have much of an appetite for like national politics. I don't care who the president is, honestly, but I think churches can and should be more involved in their local politics.
Yes,
like.
What district is your church in?
District, your council member, the mayor's office. Like again, it doesn't matter politically which party you want to assign. Like, okay, what are the needs of our stuff, and like how can our actual like government system be used to make a difference, and how can we as the church influence that? We may not be able to have like real political power in a sense, right? But we can, get to know these people and be like, hey, they ain't gotta be Christian. I'm not saying we gotta vote in a bunch of Christians. What I am saying is that if we have relationships with these people, we can influence the laws and policies that they want to pass, right? And say, hey, we can pray, we can do all kinds of different things, and not like marry ourselves and align ourselves to them, but try to form a relationship where we can influence them and like make the system kind of work for us locally. It's a mess. It's broken. Our system's not perfect, America. But there are advantages that we do have living in this country that I think we can do a better job of like taking advantage of.
Yeah, 100%. And realize, again, your church or you don't need to be able to solve and address every single problem because you're not Jesus. That's the first identifying point. And then 2, you get the great opportunity to be able to partner along with another organization, which we talked about, global unity, also local unity, which we realized you don't have to go to South Africa to realize God is working and be encouraged over there. You can also go across the town,
across the street,
go visit another church and be encouraged based off of what God is doing in and through them too.
Yeah, man. Well, I thought this was a great 2-part conversation. Hopefully you guys did as well. Let us know what you think.
Hey, feel free to go ahead and also share this episode and the last one with some individuals. Feel free to go back and listen to the ones of which have been previously recorded. Make some critiques, send us a DM. Let's have a conversation.
Shout out to those who do listen to us and check us out and support us. But yeah, we will see you guys on the next one. Enjoy the rest of your whatever. I don't know, month, week, day, whatever. Have a great time. Love y'all. Peace.